Hello, everyone. We are going to or we're going to start at the top of the hour in about 3 minutes. We'll be starting here in just a few minutes at the top of the hour. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar discussing upgrading your Elastic Stack to 7.x. Thank you for your time. I know time is very precious, so thank you for your time. I just want to introduce myself. My name is George Kobar. I'm one of the senior support engineers here at Elastic, so I support our customers with any issues. And on my spare time, I do talks. Josh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi there, everyone. My name is Josh Dover. I'm an engineer on the Kibana team. I'm going to be showing off some of the features we added to Kibana to help you go through the upgrade process today.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. And before we proceed forward, we wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. First, if you'd like to ask a question or give us feedback, just click the chat button above the video player. Second, if you're having a hard time seeing what we're presenting or, in general, YouTube often defaults to a lower resolution. So be sure to switch to high resolution in your YouTube settings, which we have a little example there. And don't worry about taking any screenshots. Slides will be available following the webinar. So thanks, and let's get started. So one thing I wanted to introduce, or at least talk about when we refer to Elastic Stack, is kind of go over what is comprised of the stack itself. So the heart of the stack, which is Elasticsearch, right, it's a distributed RESTful search and analytics engine, and letting you unify and correlate across your metrics, log, and data. So obviously, Elasticsearch is that core piece of the stack. And how we ingest data into the Elasticsearch, there's a lot of different ways, but two of our products that are ingest products are Logstash, which is our data processing pipeline, and Beats, which is our lightweight data shippers. And how do you manage and visualize this data? Well, you use a product called Kibana, and it's a robust data visualization. And what Josh will show you a little later in the demo is a way for you to also manage the stack. So the Elastic Stack packages a set of powerful features that can be combined in various ways to address various use cases. So you can think of them as Legos. right? So you can mix and match and build whatever you want. So over the years, we've seen our community apply them in so many different ways, constantly pushing us to new areas. For example, logging, security analytics are just some classic examples. So while we continue to invest in just our core products, we're also exploring new ways to provide users with turnkey experiences for these top use cases. We have invested in productizing these solutions and areas to provide the end user with a more tailored path and the common workflows for these use cases. Right, as an example of this, we have built enterprise search, application performance monitoring, and business analytics. So we combine these with operational analytics and leveraging metrics and logging, and along with the application performance or APM business data, we build these series of solutions to help you in your business. There are many potential future use cases that benefit from these rich search and analytics platform, which you get from Elastic Stack. So the choice is really yours on how you run this stack, whether it be standalone or as a SaaS like our Elastic Cloud, on or off premises, or in containers, or Elastic Cloud Enterprise running on top of Kubernetes, right? The choice is ultimately yours. So in the topics that we want to discuss today are specifically about how to upgrading your Elastic Stack to 7.x. So we're going to be talking about the upgrade path, upgrading or using the upgrade assistant and some breaking changes. And there's a great demo that Josh has prepared for us. Upgrading the best practices, some upgrade strategies, and additional resources that you have at your disposal to help you upgrade your Elasticsearch instance. So let's go over the upgrade path. So when we look at the stack upgrade path, there is definitely a methodology of upgrading one component within the stack versus another. And if you're using the Elasticsearch Hadoop plugin that we provide, this may or may not be applicable to you, but this is the first component that you would upgrade. Followed by the main core component, which would be Elasticsearch, and then Kibana, followed by Logstash, Beats, and if you're using our application performance monitoring server, that would be the next component. And then lastly, if you had any custom plugins, and this is something that we'll discuss a little bit later. Now, most of the information these slides will have is a kind of a URL that's documentation that's supporting this slide. So we've provided this URL, so later on when we have these slides, you can kind of click on this link to provide you to the documentation to get a little more information on this. So when you're upgrading your Elasticsearch instance, obviously we have many different versions from 1.7 to 2.x and obviously all the way up to 7. So let's start off with if you're at the 2.x era in terms of your version. Well, how are you going to upgrade your cluster from 2.x to 7.x? You could go through an upgrade from 2 to 5 to 6 to 7. However, it may be just easy to do a remote reindex into 7.x. So you can stand up a brand new 7.x cluster, set it up with the right sharding strategy, the mapping template, any aliases that you want to set up. Make sure your cluster is ready to go before migrating your data over into 7.x. And one of the migrations that you're doing is remote reindexing. You're reindexing that data into 7.x. So that way you don't have to worry about going through every iteration to make it to 7. This is a great opportunity for you to reindex that data. And it doesn't have to be 2.x. It could be any .x version that you could do this remote reindex into this new 7.x cluster. So this is definitely a highly recommended path if you're at least at the 2.x range going up to 7. But let's say you wanted to look at upgrading from 5.x into 7. Well, any data that's any index that's on Elasticsearch 5.x or earlier needs to either be reindexed, which we just talked about, or deleted before upgrading. And one of the main reasons for that is obviously we want to provide that rolling upgrade experience. So if you upgraded with Elasticsearch before, one of the methods, if you have to go through major versions, is it's required for you to do what's called a full cluster restart. However, if you reindex this data and or delete, then you'll have that rolling upgrade, which means upgrading each individual Elasticsearch node at a time as you're going through, which minimizes the impact and downtime. So if you're looking at upgrading from 5.x, what we highly recommend is upgrading to the latest 5.6.x version. And that way you could use the Upgrade Assistant to then remediate any changes or any problems that you find within the instances. So as a part of the Upgrade Assistant, it automatically will, well, automatically, but you'll have to address which indices or has the problem and then reindex. So that's taken care of with the Upgrade Assistants. And Josh will go a little bit more of a demo into the latest Upgrade Assistant. But once you've gone through the 5.6.x, the latest, and you've gone through the remediation process and the reindexing, then you can do a rolling upgrade into 6.8. And then using the same process of going through the Upgrade Assistant in 6.8,
Hey George.
Yes.
I think we lost
Yes,
sound
we
here.
like first, we're just like,
Josh, can
oh,
you
let's
let me
change
know
our
if you can
setting.
hear George or not?
Yeah, I cannot.
So you should have the navigation should be final for you to be fully tested in your dev environment.
Josh, can you hop in here? I think there's a few questions.
Sure.
One of the
am I back on?
Oh yeah, George, you're back on. Thanks so much. Sorry, I think there was just a little break. We couldn't hear you for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. There's probably some squirrel or something chewing on the line, so I shoot him away. So as I was saying, we provide a lot of tools and pieces for you to upgrade from 5 to 5.6 to 6.8 to 7.1. And we're going through all these tools and in ways for you to go forward. Perfect. All right. So if you're looking to upgrade from 6.7 into 7.0, one of the things that we just introduced in our Elasticsearch version 6.8 and 7.1 is that we are, with a basic license, that you were giving security there. And we'll talk a little bit more about what's been released and what the announcement is a little bit later in the presentation. But if you're not using the basic security that's introduced in 6.8, well, the upgrade path is for you to go to 6.7, which there's an upgrade assistant there, directly into 7.0. So again, you could do a rolling upgrade. You want to go from 6.7 and then directly into 7.0. Now, however, if you're looking at upgrading from 6.7 to 7.1, this is something that that won't work. What you'll need to do is upgrade from 6.7 to 6.8 before going on to 7.1. So there's this little nuances that we introduced in the security side. So if you're on 6.7, then go to 7.0, and then you can upgrade to 7.1, or you go from 6.7, you can go upgrade to 6.8, then directly to 7.1. So we have a little URL down the bottom that kind of explains that a little further. So before you upgrade, one of the things that we want to talk about here is, some things that you should do and plan before you jump right into upgrading your stack. So one of the things that we highly recommend is create a snapshot or a backup of your indices before you upgrading. While working in support, we have a lot of users and customers that ask questions like, hey, I upgraded and something doesn't quite work. How do I roll back? Well, one of the ways that you can roll back is if you have an earlier version, a snapshot of your data that you can use. If you don't have a snapshot or backup of your indices, you won't be able to roll back. So this is very important for as an option if you needed to roll back. To have that snapshot data. You also want to check the deprecation log. So within the deprecation log, as an example, there's this one message right here. It gives you information about what things have been deprecated, if it's a setting or a mapping, something that will prepare you when you upgrade to 7 that you need to make changes to, or get ready to make changes to, so then you don't run into any problems once you've upgraded. And of course, review the breaking changes and remediate. Obviously, you know, we iterate and innovate a lot within our stack and our versions. So you'll notice that, you know, we release a lot of minor versions and we do a lot of different changes. And one thing that we highly recommend is to review these breaking changes to make sure that once you upgrade that you're not running into anything that's unexpected. So reviewing these changes is highly recommended. And if you're using custom plugins, ensure there's a compatible version that's available before you upgrade. I speak with a lot of folks that have said, hey, I've upgraded, but I just realized my plugin there's no plugin available for this. You know, then they're forced to either decide, are they gonna have to wait until the custom plugin is available, or do they roll back? So definitely make sure that there's a compatible version that's available for you. And one of the things that you know, as a part of our upgrade path, this is one of the last steps, and a lot of customers and users happen to forget about this last step. So make sure before you upgrade, make sure that the custom plugin's available. And of course, in a perfect world, you would have a test environment, a staging environment, you know, a development environment, right? And we all kind of know the reality. Sometimes you don't have that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation on what things you can do. But obviously, we highly, highly recommend having a test environment before you upgrade your production cluster. You know, there's no substitute for practice or actually doing a test before you upgrade. So we highly recommend that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Josh. Josh, if you want to take over, and he'll go over the Upgrade Assistant.
Awesome. Great. So yes, the Upgrade Assistant is a tool that kind of guides you through your upgrade process, helping you fix any issues and get ready to actually upgrade all of your nodes to 7x. So this tool is available starting in Kibana 6.6 and was improved in 6.7 as well. So like I said, it shows you all the deprecation warnings, you know, currently applying to the state of your cluster and any indices. It includes a tool for automatically reindexing any indices that were created in 5.x that need to be reindexed, as George mentioned earlier. And it's important to know that you're going to want to upgrade to the latest version of Kibana and Elasticsearch to get the complete list of warnings and any automated fixes we provide. And then lastly, this is available free in the Elastic Basic license, and as well as in the Gold and Premium licenses. So let's get right into it. So if we go to Kibana, this is Kibana 6.8. To find the Upgrade Assistant, you're going to want to go to the Management tab in the bottom left-hand corner. And then under the Elasticsearch section, you'll see the 7.0 Upgrade Assistant. And here in the Overview tab, you're going to kind of get a big picture of where you're at in terms of getting ready for upgrade. So you can see here in my cluster, I have one cluster level issue that needs to be fixed and a handful of issues with my individual indices. And then we also provide a section here to easily turn on the Elasticsearch deprecation logs that George mentioned previously. So these logs allow you to see any API calls that are coming from outside systems to your Elasticsearch cluster that are using any deprecated functionality. So you can go ahead and get ahead of any of those breaking changes you might need to fix in other applications or scripts. So let's dig into this cluster tab first. Here you're going to see a table of any issues, and you'll see either a critical or a warning label on each one of these. Anything that's marked as critical must be fixed before you can start upgrading to 7. And in the cluster tab, most of these fixes are going to be things you need to go and do manually yourself. So we include documentation here to kind of explain what needs to be changed, in order to be able to upgrade. And once you've fixed these configuration changes, when you click the refresh button here, they should disappear if they've been fixed correctly. If not, you still need something to fix something here. Now, in the Indices tab is where things get a little bit more interesting. Before we go on, I do want to mention again, back up any of your indices before making any of these changes. Most of them cannot be reverted easily. So you want to make sure you have a backup using the snapshot API in Elasticsearch before you make these changes. So as you can see, we have 3 issues right now that need to be fixed. And I can look at these by issue, or if I want to look at specific index that I'm interested in and see the different issues that apply to it, I can do that as well. Now, for some of these issues, we provide some tools to automatically remediate these issues and fix them, so you're ready to go. But some issues you will need to go fix manually. It just depends on what the issue is. So the most common issue that most of our users are going to be facing is upgrading indices that were created in 5.x that need to be reindexed before upgrading to 6. So you might see some indices in here that you decide, what, this is too old. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this. I don't need this data anymore. So that's something you can do outside this tool. But if you decide you do want to keep these indices going into 7.x, then you'll want to click on this reindex button here on the right side. And this tool is going to provide you with some kind of steps to guide you in this migration process. Some of the most common breaking changes on indices, this tool actually help guide you through reconfiguring your index to support. So you can click on this documentation to learn more about what this change is, what's going to happen to my index, how might this affect anything that's using this index. But to proceed with the reindex, you'll want to confirm that you're okay with these changes and then hit this continue button. Now, it's important to know that while this reindex process is running, you're not going to be able to update, ingest, delete, create any new documents in this index until it's complete. If you find that this is breaking some system, the reindex tool does allow you to cancel these reindices while they're running. So once I'm ready to go, I can go ahead and hit run. And that process is going to start kicking off. And I'll see the steps it proceeds in here. Now, I can actually go ahead and reindex multiple of these at a time. And all of these will run in the background until they're complete. I can leave this page and these will keep running. And I can come back and see where they're at in the future. It's important to know that, yes, until all of these are reindexed or deleted, you're not going to be able to add any 7.x nodes to your cluster. So you will need to resolve all of these critical issues before you move forward with your upgrade. Now, if you do have hundreds of thousands of these indices you need to reindex, we do provide some APIs, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So you can do these in bulk. One thing to consider is while these reindexes are running, you're actually putting a little bit more load on your Elasticsearch cluster than normal. So you're going to want to definitely monitor your disk usage, CPU usage, memory usage while these are running, and make sure you're not running, reindexing all of your indices at once. You're going to be creating a completely new copy of this data, and until the reindex is completed, you'll have 2 copies of this data in your cluster. So it's really important you have enough RAM and disk space to accommodate this second copy of data. Now, there's another fix I want to highlight as well. Going into 7.x, we have removed the automatic expansion of searches that do not specify a specific field. So you may have some indices where you have thousands of fields, and whenever you search on these in Dashboard or Visualize in 7.x, this will actually break unless you set this index query default field setting. We do provide an automated fix for these for metric beat and file beat indices. But if you have any other indices that have thousands of indexed fields, you're going to go ahead and set this setting yourself as well. But there's, once again, documentation on how to do this, as well as some APIs to do it yourself. So I can just click fix here. And then when I refresh, that error goes away, as well as the indices that have already finished reindexing. Great. So once all these issues have been resolved, all the critical issues, you can go ahead and start your rolling upgrade into 7.x. And if you're using cloud, I'll kind of walk you through how to do this. So if we go to the cluster I'm ready to upgrade in cloud, I can click upgrade here, select a version. Cloud's going to do a second check to make sure there aren't any other pending issues that need to be resolved. And I can go ahead and click upgrade. And this will start the rolling upgrade process for me. So there will be no downtime, no maintenance I need to do on any of these nodes. It's completely automated. And that's really it. I can watch the new nodes come up and the old ones spin down, and I'm done upgrading. Now, once you have upgraded to 7x, it's important to actually revisit the upgrade assistant, which you'll see is called 8.0 upgrade assistant, in your 7.x Kibana. One issue that will affect some users is any APM indices you may have will need to be migrated to a new format before you'll be able to see them in the APM UI. So once again, this tool is very similar to the upgrade, the reindex tool in 6.8. You'll want to confirm that these changes are acceptable and continue with the reindex. And then you'll see these indices in the APM UI. So let's go back to the slides and take a look at some of the breaking changes that affect most people. We're not going to be able to cover all of them, but we will cover a few. Actually, before that, I do want to mention again, there are APIs available for checking the status of your deprecation warnings, doing reindexes, and adding that default field setting for indices with more than 1,024 mapped fields. These APIs are great if you're, once again, reindexing thousands or even just hundreds of indices. And we have documentation with examples about how to do that. So some of the common breaking changes, I just want to highlight two of them that are going to be affecting most people. And that is the typeless APIs introduced in 6.7 and an Elastic's common schema format, which changes the name of some of the fields that are present in indices created by Beats or APM. You can see a full list of all the breaking changes for Elasticsearch in this documentation link here. Most of them are pretty minor, affect features that are not commonly used, but you'll definitely want to do an audit through this list and see if any of these affect you. And once again, the upgrade tool will highlight most of these for you. So the typeless APIs, if you've been with us since 5.x, you remember that moving into 6, we used to support multiple different mapping types. And in 6.x, we removed that, and now each index can only have a single mapping type. In 7.x, we're moving forward with the phase out of multiple types, and we're introducing typeless APIs. So these APIs allow you to interact with Elasticsearch as if there had never been multiple types in Elasticsearch. We are providing kind of an escape hatch here, which we're calling the include type name query parameter. And you can tack this on to different APIs to allow you to use the old typed APIs just with a deprecation message throughout 7.x. So you can actually start using this query parameter in 6.7. We're going to see some examples of this. And that code will continue to work against 7.x just with a deprecation message. And then in 8.0, that typed APIs in this query parameter will be removed completely, and any API calls using it will fail in 8.0. So what does this actually mean? What does this look like? So if I have this request on the left, I'm creating a new document in my Twitter index, and that document is of the mapping type mytype. In 7.x, we don't have types anymore, so the API is actually just called _doc, and I would create or put this document that way. And this would produce no deprecation messages. Now, if I wanted to use the include type name parameter so I don't break anything, I could actually include a query parameter here that allows me to use the myType type name here. And we'll see an example of that here in a second. Another example is if I'm actually creating a new index or updating the settings for a new index. In 6.x, I would typically include the type name right here as part of the request. But in 7.x, that's not supported by default. So if I wanted to continue to include this myType part, while giving me some time to go through and audit all my code to remove that, I could add this include type name true parameter, and this is supported in 6.7, 6.8, and all of 7.x. And I wouldn't have to change the format of my request body at all, and Elasticsearch would understand how to read this request. Now remember, in 7.x, you're going to start to get deprecation warnings, which will show up in your Elasticsearch deprecation logs, as well as in the headers of the response from Elasticsearch from this API call. The other breaking change I want to cover is Elastic Common Schema. So Elastic Common Schema is a new pattern we've introduced starting in 7.0, which allows, which basically presents a common set of field names across all of our Beats products and APM products, and allows you to correlate events across these different data sources very easily. So you can correlate maybe a security event with a log event or a metric event at a single point in time with these common field names. So it's important to know that these change in names may break any of your ingest pipelines or log stash filters that are dependent on any of these fields from Beats or APM to do some kind of modification or mapping to the data before it goes in Elasticsearch. So you're going to want to take a look at the list of changes that have happened, so you can change the old name to the new name, and we provide documentation on that. So as an example, here are some of the names that changed. If you're using docker.container.name, that field is now container.name on any indices created by Beats 7.0 or APM 7.0. And here at the bottom, you can see a list of all of the field name changes. So you can easily do a find and replace on any of your ingest pipelines or log slash filters, or any of your visualizations or safe searches that may need to be updated for this new format. We plan to use this format, long-term going forward, so we can easily correlate, all of our Beats data together, as well as any custom data you have. You can use this format as well to be able to easily correlate data across different data sources. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to George, who's going to talk through some of our different strategies you can employ to upgrade.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. Get back here. I was just reading some of your questions, which is great. We'll be able to address that here in just a second. So let's talk about some upgrade strategies. So obviously, one of the things that we highly recommend is test, right? And we know in the perfect world, the situation, or every perfect world, you have an environment to test, right? And one of those things, if you don't have an environment, we recommend anything from a cloud instance, a laptop, a virtual machine, a container, Elastic Cloud. I mean, it really doesn't matter in a way that if you can run it in your laptop as a container or just as a Java process, you can still upload one indice from your production cluster and at least go through the process of upgrading. So we highly recommend doing testing for your strategies here. One thing you could do if you're looking at going from your Elastic Stack is do a remote reindex into, for example, your laptop or virtual machine, but into something like Elastic Cloud, which is something that Josh was just demoing. So you can do a remote reindex into Elastic Cloud, and for you to use into that data and practicing upgrading from there. Another strategy is from the Elastic Stack, right, you can take a snapshot into some shared storage, as an example, like the AWS S3 repo or into Google Cloud Storage. And then you can do a restore into Elastic Cloud. So as an example of this, I took a quick screenshot of our screenshot with Elastic Cloud. You can go through and if you notice towards the bottom, step number 4, I put a little red box around it. You can restore from a snapshot. So if you take a snapshot, you have the backup, which is recommended, but then restore your cluster from this snapshot. And this way, you have all of your data. It's backed up, and then also now you can restore that into a cluster that meets what version that you're currently on. On a side and go through the upgrade assistant and see what needs to be done. And you know what? If you upgrade and it happens to fail or there's issues, at least this is just another environment and not your production environment. So you can kind of spend some time in figuring out what was going on. So highly recommend running the upgrade assistance against any restored or reindexed clusters. And we also recommend for reviewing Elasticsearch and Kibana breaking changes within the documentation. So obviously these are some best practices on things that you should do prior to upgrading. One other thing that a lot of users that I speak to, they may want the ability to keep your older cluster, let's say a 2.x cluster, alongside maybe their new cluster, their 7.x cluster. So one of the things that you can do is use this cross-cluster search. So you can devise a way to search against a 2.x cluster and your 7.x cluster. So having this cross-cluster search ability kind of unlocks that as another strategy that you can do. If you want to, hey, we have 2.x, this data is relevant, we have to keep this for regulatory reasons, whatever the reasons on you holding onto your data at 2.x. If you want to build a whole brand new 7.1, then you can use that cross-cluster search to search both. So one of the things that I like to talk about is kind of some of these lessons learned from some folks that have already upgraded and some things that we've seen users come across. And I want to kind of talk about this. It might slightly overlap what Josh was saying, but at least we'll kind of hit home on some of these things that you should be aware of. So one of the things when you upgrade Kibana, you may get a message that a shard failed when you're viewing a Beats dashboard. So if you have a dashboard specifically from Beats that you're visibly seeing this with the Kibana, I would definitely listen up. So after upgrading to Elasticsearch 7.0, any indices that's created before Beats 6.6 or older won't work until you add the specific setting index.query.default_field. That's added to each index. And once that's been done, to the setting, then this will resume. This will be okay. Now, indices created in Beats 6.7 or later are not affected. So to add the setting, you can do this either through the Upgrade Assistant, which Josh just demoed, or you can add the setting manually. One of the other things that we've seen here when upgrading Logstash is we highly recommend to drain the persistent queue. So if you have a persistent queue that's in 6.2 and earlier, what we recommend to do to drain the queue is to, in the logstash.yaml file, you can set queue.drain to true, restart a Logstash for this setting to take effect, and then shut down Logstash using either Control-C or Sigterm and wait for the queue to empty. Now, if you're using the persistent queue in 6.3 and later, one thing you can do is just shut down the original Logstash instance. You can spin up a brand new instance, and then you can set the path.queue in the Logstash YAML settings and point to the original queue directory. So those are some things that we highly recommend if you're using persistent queue, to drain first before upgrading. And when we're looking at upgrading Beats, some of the lessons learned here is you may get some unauthorized user privileges message sent, right? So you want to check privileges for any index for the lifecycle management, which is on by default in 7.0. So the index lifecycle management is something that we just introduced that helps you manage your indexes in a way to, either to roll up or to close, to either delete. If you do a lot of time series data or data analytics, and you're constantly receiving logs and monitoring data, one thing that you may want to do is, let's say after 14 days, you want to move that over maybe to an older system, and maybe eventually delete the data or take a snapshot of it. Index lifecycle management is one of those features that's integrated into Elasticsearch that helps you with that cycle. Well, starting in Beats 7.0, the index lifecycle management is on by default. So you want to make sure Beats has the privileges needed to use index lifecycle management, or you can just disable ILM, or this new feature I'm talking about. So for help troubleshooting authorization issues, you can look within the URL that I provided below that says users not authorized, and it can walk you through that process. So, and one thing obviously to be aware of is the Elastic Comma Schema. And actually this is something that Josh just spoke about. So definitely get a chance to kind of review all that information. It's really great, but can impact you in terms of when you're upgrading. Some other things that we've seen from users and customers is when they upgrade, they notice that the realm type has changed. This is when we talk about XPack security. This is a message that maybe some of our users are getting. So what we've done is we've removed the realm type from the Elasticsearch YAML as a requirement. So if we look on the left-hand side, we see xpack.security.auth.realms. Well, you can see we have under LDAP 1, we have type LDAP. But as to the right, we're actually migrating, we're getting rid of that type. So now it's just LDAP.LDAP1 and the order. So if you're having some issues with not able to log in or not using Active Directory, this is more likely the cause. So definitely look to see that you remove the type in your XPack security side or your realms within your Elasticsearch.yaml file. And one of the things that we speak with customers, and I think this is kind of related to a question that I saw in the chat, which we'll get to here, is as when you're going to production, TLS and SSL is a requirement for Elasticsearch node communication for clusters in production as of 6.x. So let's say you're coming from a version maybe that's at 5 or something that you haven't enabled yet. Well, when you go up to when you upgrade later from 5.x to 6 or even to 7, you want to make sure that you configure SSL and TLS for that communication between each nodes. So you may see messages related to handling client HTTP traffic, closing connection. This is not an SSL or a TLS record. That means that there's systems that are still attempting to connect to Elasticsearch over HTTP rather than HTTPS. So you want to make sure that you configure TLS and SSL before upgrading. And if you're still getting some of these messages, you want to make sure that that traffic's been changed that's connecting to Elasticsearch from HTTP to HTTPS. So one of the questions that I'll kind of talk about now is, do you have to do or can you do a rolling upgrade while you upgrade the security, or does it require a full restart? So the question, or the answer to that question is yes. When you are enabling security through Elasticsearch, a full restart is required. And the reason for that is those settings are contained within the Elasticsearch.yaml file, and the only time that we read that configuration file is on boot up. And that's one of the things when we load security settings, we want to have that load when we first start up, rather than something that can be changed within while the service is running. So anytime you enable security, a full restart is required, and that's required across all the nodes. Perfect. And so here are some of the resources that you have at your disposal when you're upgrading, right? So obviously we have a breadth of documentation that's available, and a lot of those links that I have provided below, whether it's the full stack upgrade, walking through each component, and each component independently has its own documentation like Kibana, Elasticsearch, Logstash, etc. Now we also offer support. So if you are looking to have production level support, we do offer that as a subscription service. And we have different tiers for that. And support is from the department that I come from, allows consultative type support that we can help you out with these upgrades. So if you plan on doing an upgrade, let's say after hours, in the middle of the night, and you have platinum tier support, we'll be able to help you during those times if you're having issues or planning for those upgrades. So that's something that you may want to consider. Obviously, what's great is our training and our consulting teams. Our training, goes over how to upgrade and the upgrade process. In consulting, if you have, you may have the technical know-how, but you might not have the time nor the person power to do so. So maybe consulting can help you not only review your environment, but also prepare you for upgrade and also do the upgrade. So consulting is also a great option. And of course, our community. One thing that Josh and I and all of Elastic are ecstatic about is the active community. We have a lot of support people, development engineers, all on the community and helping out. And we're very happy, and I'm very proud to have a community that is so helpful and very active. So, if you have any questions at all, not only do you have the people at Elastic, but everyone else that's enthusiastic and know the product inside and out are also willing to help. Okay, so some of the documentation I want to clearly call out is the cross stack upgrade guide, which is here. That's a great guide to start off with, understanding the stack as a whole. So what we talked about earlier: Elastic, Kibana, Logstash, Beats, the end-to-end stack. One thing we also recommend is going through the release highlights, so you can go by product, seeing what was released, what's been changed. And of course, the breaking changes documentation is very helpful when you're planning. And looking at a support matrix, maybe it's you're considering a new solution or something that's going to be integrating with Elasticsearch. Support matrix is great to see which products will work with what, and will definitely help you within that process. And just as a reminder, our end of life dates for 5.6.x was back on March 11th of 2019. So obviously we're here to help out if you have any questions or anything, but if you do happen to find bugs or things that are on with 5.6, our development team has changed their focus on to newer version of Elasticsearch. So we're not doing any bug fixes for anything that's 5.6.x or lower. And of course, just to kind of give you some foresight, our end of life for 6.8.x is November 11th of 2020. So, if you need to get to 6.8 to upgrade to 7.1, then okay, this is the time in which you have to plan for that upgrade, maybe to 7.x. Hopefully, we obviously would like to see you upgrade a lot sooner, but that's kind of the deadline that you're looking for. And one big announcement that we wanted to talk about before we jump into questions here is we wanted to announce that we're thrilled that the core security features of Elastic Stack are now free. So this means that users can now encrypt network traffic, create and manage users, define roles that the product index and cluster level access, and full secure Kibana with spaces. So this is an exciting step for you, our community. And we've also opened the code of these features and many more last year by making them free today. So everyone now can have a fully secured cluster hassle-free. So that's one of the things that we introduced in 6.8 and why we recommend going to 6.8 and then directly to 7.1, because these security options are free. So yay. So we wanted to thank you for joining our webinar today. Hopefully you found a lot of value and a lot of information here. And again, these slides and a recording of this later will be available when, after this presentation. But we do look like we have some questions that are coming up here from IRC. So Josh and I can kind of go through those. And again, for the folks that will be leaving us, thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it. So one of the first questions I see here is there any schema rule changes or reindexing from 6.x to 7.x? So there are some changes for you to be aware of, and there's probably a lot of changes for me to kind of cover on the phone or over chat. So probably one of the best things to do is look at the breaking changes on what can be done. So you can definitely reindex one index and at a time. You don't have to do the entire cluster and start looking from there. But one of the things that Josh had mentioned is the reindexing or the changes of type or the continuing changes of the removal of multiple types. So that's one just off the top of my head, but it's something you definitely want to take a look at our breaking changes to do. So I hope that helps. So we have another question that says, hi, I'm using ELK in version 6.3 without security enabled. I have 3 master, 2 data nodes, and 2 Elasticsearch coordinating only nodes. My question is, what's the best approach to upgrade my ELK stack to version 7.1 and to enable security? And I think he mentions he or she, if I well understand your documentation, it's not possible to do a rolling upgrade. If I want to enable security in my stack, I'll have to do a full cluster restart. So that is correct. And this is kind of the question I was referring to. So anytime you're going to enable security, it's a one-time full cluster restart, meaning that if you enable it with your version that you're at, or 6.3, that's the only full cluster restart that you'll do once you enable it, or if you need to make changes to the Elasticsearch.yaml file, it requires a full cluster restart. So in terms of how we let's see here. And the reason why is because of the Elasticsearch.yaml file needs to be read once the service Elasticsearch service first starts. So that's one of the things. And we highly recommend, as it's kind of mentioned this presentation, that we recommend going to 6.8 just because of the new security features are now free. And also the upgrade assistant. And as Josh probably showed within the demo, that it makes your life so much easier to go through and actually visualize and see what needs to be remediated, what needs to be reindexed, and that definitely can be a huge help. Another question here we see is there a specific node order to doing an upgrade, i.e. the upgrade data nodes before the master nodes, or does it matter? So we recommend doing the master nodes first, and then the data nodes. And so it depends on how you configured your Zen discovery nodes. You'll want to make sure that you at least have one of those master nodes, or you have enough master nodes to keep a cluster quorum together. So you can do maybe one node at a time and make sure it comes back up. And one of the things that we just recently changed is how the discovery nodes are done. So it's definitely something to be to read on as well, on how we identify or how masters are able to identify that it's able to come up with a cluster state. Okay, let's see here. There's another question here. So if I have 6.5 to upgrade to 7.1, then I need to upgrade to 6.8, then to 7.1. Yes, that's just only taking advantage of the upgrade assistant, but also because we included the security features for free. So that's just something that I think is kind of a repeat, but good to mention again. All right, I closed the old indice created in 6.x, but the error messages are the same. Can you help me? So if you have any indices that are closed, and it doesn't matter what version they're in, they'll definitely need to be addressed somehow. So closed indices still consume resources and specific storage. So if you're seeing issues there, you more likely have to reopen that index and then reindex that, or look at what's going on with that index. So you have to reopen it. But obviously, if you don't have a support subscription, if you do, we highly recommend it. But if you don't, one of the best places to get help is the community or community forums, and kind of provide your error message and things. But I definitely would try opening up that index again and seeing what's going on. So that's definitely a good question. So one of the other questions here is, will the deprecation log tell you which indice is being impacted by the issue? And it looks pretty general log message. Yeah, the error message that I used just for the slides is pretty generic. I didn't go into the full stack of what that message would be. And if I recall, yes, it does give you more information about what indices it's impacting. But another thing is to use that upgrade assistant. It actually will obviously show you visually what index is being impacted there. So does Elastic.co have visibility into Amazon's managed Elasticsearch offering into Elasticsearch 7? So no, the Amazon managed Elasticsearch offering is owned and ran and operated by Amazon. So we have no visibility into this. But I do want to say just what you saw on Josh's slide there, or his demo. Anytime Elastic releases a new version of our Elasticsearch, you can use that same day on our cloud offering. So when you can download 7.2, then it will be available on our Elastic Cloud offering, our Elasticsearch SaaS offering. And that's something that you could either run on Amazon or on Google Cloud, as an example. That kind of gives you some ideas that when we release something, it's available also that same day. It looks like okay. So the other question is, will these rolling upgrades and tool sets be available for Amazon Managed Service offering? And I'm not really sure about that specifically. I know probably the best way to go about that is to say that we know of our tools and what things that will be available to us to our Elastic Cloud offering. It's something that you might want to ask on the Amazon support forum on their side and see if that'll be available or not. But especially, it'll definitely be available to us on the Elasticsearch side. And sorry, I've been kind of hogging all these questions. Josh, do you want to jump into?
I'm good. I've been jumping in the chat.
Oh, cool.
Let's see. Well, George, kind of for you, what is the best upgrade path for people upgrading from 2.x who want to get to 7?
Yeah, so I highly recommend, and I've told this to a lot of our users or customers, I feel it's best to reindex. Now, I mean, the implication there is that you have another cluster that's available, or another resource that's available that you can kind of stand up a 7.1 in its place on its side, and then you can do a reindex. That's going to be by far the most successful and probably the more planned way to do that. Now, I mean, you can upgrade going through the different versions. For example, from 2.x to 5, and then from 5 to 6, and then 6 to 7. So that's totally obtainable. The best thing to do there, though, is we know it requires a full cluster restart when you go from 2 to 5, and then making sure that you reindex and you do or delete any of the older data that you don't need. Then going from 5 to 6, 6 to 7, then you can definitely do a rolling upgrade. The upgrade assistant was introduced in 5.6, and of course in 6.8. So those are definitely those launching points that you want to go to. But coming from 2.x, if you don't have, as another alternative, if you don't have an in-place, if you don't have the ability to have a way to stand up another 7.1 side by side your 2.x cluster, if you do have a lot of the source data there, that's another thing you can consider. You can consider shutting down the 2.x side, standing up 7.1, and re-ingesting the data. That might be another alternative. If you have the backup of the data or the source of the data that you can re-ingest into Elasticsearch, that's also another method. But we highly recommend going to reindex if you're going from that older side, not because it's not possible, but just because it's a lot easier.
I've got one more. It was pointed out that the upgrade assistant really only shows you deprecation messages that affect Elasticsearch. There are breaking changes in other products like Kibana, Beats, and Logstash that currently the upgrade assistant doesn't provide you really much information on. So definitely want to highlight you should check out the breaking changes docs for those products as well. For most of them, it has to do with how you configure it or install it, but it's definitely worth going through those lists, which are much shorter. and making sure those don't affect your installation.
Perfect. Let's see here. Is there another? I know we've got about 3 minutes or so, so we definitely have a great amount of questions. So thank you for those folks that answered questions, or excuse me, asked those questions. Is there anything that's there, Josh, that maybe that you haven't covered or I haven't covered?
I don't think so. We can hang around on the chat for a little longer if anyone else has any more questions.
Perfect. And while we're waiting, maybe if there's any questions that come in, Josh and I, and of course the Elastic group of folks, want to extend our deepest thank you for being a part of the community and for using our software and solutions. Obviously, without you and the folks that are using our software, I could safely say that Josh and I wouldn't be here. So thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Okay. Well, I think we'll call it, if that's okay with you, Josh. Perfect. Thanks again, everyone. I really appreciate your time, and if those slides should be available and a recording after this. And thanks again for your time.